What's up guys, and welcome back to Tech Plant. Today I want to show you how I set up my very first aquascape. Let's check it out. This box will end up changing this channel forever. I've been wanting to get into aquascaping and just overall beautiful aquarium stuff for a long time. So here is the start, the official awesome aesthetic start. So this is a waterbox 6, which is a 6-gallon rimless tank. Rimless tanks are kind of all the rage for their aesthetic because they don't have those big black rims, and it just looks very simplistic and allows you just to focus on what's inside. I'm starting small because I do like nano tanks. I think they're really cool, and for this one I did build a little stand that I can put this on just to make it so I can move it a lot easier when I need to. Even though the stand is super simple, just a few pieces of plywood, I think it adds a lot to the tank's aesthetic, and I think it looks great. I've done a ton of research on this and tried to read up as much as I can to start this out, and there's a lot of different substrate choices. I went with a really easy one. It's a little more pricey, but it's good for shrimp and plants. That is fluval stratum, and that's what we'll be using. For me, I'm going to have it so everyone looks at the side of the tank or the long side, so I'm going to kind of angle all my substrate so it gets deeper towards the back, just to fight that weird like angled kind of appearance change that water has. A lot of cool aquascape YouTubers have like neat little stainless steel tools, but I don't have those yet because this is my first one, so I'm just kind of using any flat thing. With every aquascape or terrarium or any of these kind of builds you see on YouTube, everyone starts with the hardscape. For me, I'm going to use this little piece of driftwood and one single rock, and let's see kind of what I can get out of it. I kind of had an idea in my head, but I still kind of set them around just to kind of see what they looked like, and I even asked for some opinions from my friends and family, and I decided to kind of put the tree on top of the rock, so it's almost like one of those bonsai trees that grow over a rock. I think it looks pretty neat. However, the problem is mine doesn't quite fit down flat. However, with this simple recipe, we can cook this puppy and make it a lot more flexible so it'll fit down on the rock a lot easier and allow me to modify it. If you're trying to bend or modify your driftwood, all you really need to do is boil the heck out of it, and that'll soften up the wood and allow you to bend it without breaking it. Now, obviously, to a certain extent, this isn't the most perfect way, but it worked pretty well for what I needed to do, and I didn't have to do too much trimming, and I could kind of bend it to form so it could fit around the rock. You can see now, compared to how it was earlier, this thing sits flush with the rock, and it's a much closer to what I had in my mind, and I like the way it's looking. Now, for my driftwood, I've seen a lot of cool stuff on YouTube where people take different mosses and they adhere them to the tree, or driftwood in our case, and it makes it almost simulate some sort of underwater tree, or just an aged look with a lot of moss growing on top. So I want to replicate that and try that. So I'm going to show you kind of how I applied my Java moss on top of my driftwood. A lot of people will use super glue. I don't have any that I think would be like aquarium safe. So I'm going to use the fishing line method. I think it's a lot easier and a lot less permanent. And all that really entails is taking some very low poundage or kilogram weightage, I don't know what they call it over in Europe, but here, low poundage fishing line, maybe 2-pound test. It's very thin, clear, and it's almost impossible to see. And you just take that and tie the moss to the actual tree and use it to secure the tree to the moss to the limbs. It works pretty well, and once it grows just a little bit, you can't see the fishing line at all. While you're doing this, make sure you're keeping everything nice and wet, because if your moss dries out, it could die, and then you'll just kind of have some like brown moss tied to your stick once it dies over the next few days. So make sure you have a spray bottle and you just keep it nice and wet while you're tying the string and the moss to the tree limbs. Once I finish tying everything on, I put it back in the tank, and I kind of like how it looks. The only thing you have to realize is a lot of this is kind of a long game or a marathon. Your aquascape isn't going to look perfect at first because you have to let the plants and everything kind of grow into their look. So kind of think about the future when doing your aquascaping or gluing or planting, because it's not right now what you're looking for. It's in like a month when everything grows in that you're trying to get to. Now I'm going to start adding some water. I'm not going to fill it completely up because I just want to get enough water in there for me to start planting and kind of seeing, are my plants just going to float up as soon as I put them in the substrate, or what's going to happen. And it's easier when the water's not so deep because that way you don't have to reach your whole hand in there. So I'm just prepping it to start planting some of the plants around the hardscape. I'm not 100% what this species is because I got it at like an aquarium meetup, but I believe it's some sort of Java fern, and this one will kind of push out rhizomes and just keep sprouting up all around. So I'm going to plant these around the base of the rock. I cut mine up into smaller pieces, at least at the rhizome level, so I can plant them and have them kind of spread in evenly. It's really nice to have a long steel tweezers because that'll let you plant this stuff a lot easier. The next plant I'm going to be planting is going to be called Ludwigia repens, and this one will turn pretty red as it gets to the top. They kind of look a little rough now, but again, it's all about the future and when they grow in. They're kind of hard for me to plant with such a low water level because they keep falling over. So I'm going to add some more water and see if that helps me aquascape a little better. Remember guys, this is my very first aquascape, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. So maybe not, don't take all my advice here, but just kind of watch and enjoy. While planting this tall stuff in the back, I kept knocking the tree around. So in the future, it might be smarter to kind of tie this down to the rock somehow or super glue it. It might just make it easier, but I don't like many permanent solutions, so I don't mind just nudging it around and having to re-put it back. But with the extra water, I was able to plant this stuff a little easier because it kind of floats up. I really want a nice like carpeted look, so I'm going to try it with these dwarf baby tears. However, I'm not sure how well this is going to work and how long it's actually going to take. A lot of people who have nice carpets usually need to use CO2 and good lighting, and I think just have a little bit more skill. Again, these are my kind of first forays into aquatic plants, so we'll see if the terrestrial plant care kind of transitions into aquatic plant care. Doing this is pretty messy, so now the water is just kind of full of plant materials and everything that broke off while I did everything. So I'm going to clean that up with a net, but so far it's looking pretty decent. I'm going to let this thing sit for a few days, and then I'm going to get a filter in there and get it cycling so I can start adding some fish. I do want floating plants in here like a lot of other channels, so I'm going to put in some red rooted floaters and then this other kind of floating fern style. They spread pretty quickly and they look pretty awesome. So it's been a few days and I've had 2 or 3 ghost shrimp in here trying to kind of produce a little bit of waste. That way we can get the bacteria and the cycle going, along with this white bio ball which has been in a cycle tank and this filter. So this should kind of keep everything going and get all the beneficial bacteria. Now that my tank is decently cycled, I'm going to try and introduce a little bit of livestock again to produce some waste and get that bacteria going. I chose something very small that produces a lot of waste, and that is the Ember Tetra. They're very small and they are pretty cool looking with their bright orange colors, and they're kind of transparent. I like these fish too because they only get about an inch and they like to school and they look pretty beautiful as they swim. So far all the inhabitants seem healthy and happy. They're just kind of swimming around, checking out their new digs and whatnot, and the ghost shrimp are still doing okay too. But the main reason why I started all this is because I want to raise like Neocaridina shrimp, which are these little designer shrimp that people have kind of bred and produce all kinds of wild colors. So I'm trying to prep this tank for those. So I got to make sure the water parameters are good and the tank is well cycled before I introduce them. It's been a few more days and my water parameters have been stable. So I'm going to try and get some shrimp and introduce them. For this tank, I'm going to start with yellows. I do have some blues hidden in another tank, but for this one specifically, I'm going to do cherry yellow shrimp. I've seen a lot of people do some cool like drip acclimation with like a little tube and it just drips water slowly to get them used to it. But for me, I just wipe the bag down really good, float it in the tank, and then I poke some small holes in the sides, and then I hope like the water kind of exchanges between the holes very slowly because there's really no difference I guess in the temperature, and that should acclimate them pretty well. After watching the other inhabitants of the tank just swim around and enjoy it, now it's been long enough to kind of release these guys into their new home. From what it looks like to me, the shrimp like their new home and they're already crawling around searching for new food. I think these guys are super awesome because they're just tiny little, I don't know how I kind of imagine them, but I just like the idea that you can plant this entire underwater world and then let these inhabitants kind of walk around and just cruise around in their new home. It's really cool, and I just sit in front of the fish tank for just like 10-20 minutes at a time just watching these guys swim around. I like the balance of having fish and shrimp because that way you have something kind of in the top half of the tank swimming around, and then you have your shrimp kind of scuttling around the bottoms and swimming just pretty much everywhere. I think these things are super awesome, and I hope mine start breeding fast so I can have even more. Here's the tank quite some time later. It's had some algae blooms, it's had snail population blooms, and things are just doing really well. We did lose one ghost shrimp, but I think he was kind of already sick from before, but all the other Neocaridina shrimp are fine, and so are the fish. So let's just take a minute here to enjoy some B-roll footage of this stuff with some music and see how they're doing. now that everything's had a chance to kind of grow out, it's time to kind of groom this thing, but I'll save that for another video and kind of show you what to do with your aquascape once it gets to a certain growth point and how to update it and keep things going smoothly. Alright guys, that sums up this video. I hope you like this new content that I'm adding to the channel. I really like aquatic planting and raising shrimps and fish. I think it's super cool. So I hope you guys like the expansion of the channel. You're going to still see lots of plant content, and now you're going to see some aquatic plant content. So hope you guys enjoy it. As always, may your plants grow strong and healthy. I'll see you next time.